Hello everyone, and welcome back to this session discussing the new flexible working environment. The discussions are going to be moderated by Geert VANDERHAEGHE, who is owner and general manager of Lexitech and a representative of the Language Industry Expert Group. Hello, Geert. You're muted.
It should be better. Good morning. I'm glad to be with you.
Good morning. You can send in your questions the usual way using the tab on the right-hand side of your screen, which is called Questions and Polls. And with that, I'm not going to take up any more of the time. There's plenty to discuss. I now hand you over to Geert's capable hands.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the introduction, Minda. So indeed, my name is Geert VANDERHAEGHE, and I sit here in sunny Brussels today. Indeed, I'm the owner of a translation company here in Brussels by the name of Lexitech, and I am also on the board of ELIA. And it's on that behalf, actually, or that quality as a board member of ELIA, that I also sit on the LIND, and which was how we came to being the moderator today. I would like to take a couple minutes to talk about ELIA, about the European Language Industry Association. It's an association of about 250 LSPs, language service providers, all throughout Europe, with as a motto, which comes every so often, by the members, for the members. So it's an association of mostly smaller LSPs. Indeed, our business is very fragmented. The idea is to have a number of activities that help these companies in developing themselves, in developing their business, in developing themselves also as professionals. Our activities until recently were almost exclusively conferences, but we all know how that world has changed. So some of these conferences have gone virtual. We have also had a program of webinars since March 2020, believe it or not. And we're also working on other programs, training programs, in order to increase or to change also the value that we provide to our members. There is actually a booth of ELIA on the Umbrella platform, so I invite you to go and look there. If, however, you would like to have more, you could also Google. If you're into Google, you could Google ELIA Association, which bring you to the information about their association. So if you don't be shy, if you feel that, as an LSP, you want to develop friends, you want to develop business, you want to develop partners throughout Europe, that's actually an excellent value. Myself, I've been a member for 5 years and a board member for 4 years, and I cannot start to tell you, the value I have derived and the friendship and the value I have derived from being on ELIA. So that was the small commercial to start. Let me come back to the subject that we wanted to talk about today. The title of the session is Flexible Working Environment. If you look at our industry from a distance, you will see quite a few of that already. Our industry is very much characterized by a freelance model. We need our translators, native speakers, and quite often in the country where they live. So this has been proper to our industry for a very long time. It's also an industry with lots of smaller companies. It's a very fragmented industry, is the word that we use for that, because quite often, professionals start a business for their own, work with a couple more translators, and softly develop the business in that way. And then, of course, thirdly, like everywhere else, and that was the subject that was mostly talked about yesterday, technology has a huge impact on what we do. So this flexible environment was already something that we had to think and work on for quite some time, until, of course, last year, March 2020, when the whole world went topsy-turvy, and we had to think further about these things, and some of the changes that were afoot already were accelerated, certain things stopped, and so today, what we wanted to do is, with a panel of very distinguished professionals, we wanted to talk through these issues and the situations that people have experienced. What we've thought today was to talk with four constituents, if you so will, of constituencies within our industry. Respectively, that would be the smaller LSPs, the somewhat larger LSPs, the freelancers, and then fourthly, the technology world itself. So let me introduce our panel members to you this morning. Firstly, we have Martina Hitler from Austria. She's the Deputy Secretary General of Universitas, which is the Association of Freelance Translators in Austria. She's also trained as an interpreter into English and Spanish, and I was quite fascinated to see that she also has a training for sign language interpretation. So she will talk to the situation as we see it for the freelance world. Our second panel member is Alina Birsan. Alina is a fellow board member in Elia. Alina owns a translation company in Bucharest, which she has founded. So she started from scratch. She has founded it herself and is now developing that further. She was also elected, and congratulations again, as the vice president of Elia just a couple of weeks ago. She will talk to the situations as we see it for the smaller LSPs. Fourthly, we have among us Kata Juhász. Kata has something in common with me because she is not trained as a linguist. Kata is trained as a psychologist, as a work psychologist, and after a career in the more the consultancy world and HR consulting, she became recently the head of HR at MemoQ. MemoQ, for those who don't know it, is a technology provider based in Budapest, I thought it was, in Hungary, and which provide a language management system. So she can talk to HR issues, and she can also talk, of course, to what happened in the technology world. And then lastly, but not least, of course, we have among us Kåre Lindahl. Kåre has about 30 years of experience in our industry under his belt. Today he is the CEO of Venga. And has long experience with creating, developing, merging, increasing businesses. Actually, some of his experience is quite live now because Venga announced quite recently that they will merge with ARGOS, a Polish company. So welcome all four of you. Glad to have you among us. And if you don't mind, I would like to start with Martina.
Yes, hello, good morning, everybody.
So Martina, when we come to the, I put the question bluntly to you. And actually, before I do that, I see I'm forgetting something. We would also like to have a couple of polls during this conference here. So there was 3 sets of questions that we have prepared for the participants. So I'm talking to the director now. If we probably could launch the first poll and give the people a few minutes to answer that first question about how the changes impacted not only the 5 of us around the table here, but also the wider audience. So back to you, Martina. Translators, freelancers already work quite often on their own. The shock was just the same, but so in brief, what do you think would be the main impact as you saw it since March 2020?
Yeah, as you said, the working environment of freelance translators has not changed much. They worked at home before COVID, and they have been working at home ever since. But what has changed is the fields that they work in. So in some sectors, some areas, the number of translations went down considerably, for example, in tourism and the cultural area, as you can imagine. So a lot of translators had to find new sources of income. They had new specializations. Some took on part-time employments. Some went to teaching online because during the pandemic, people thought, okay, it's a good time now. I have time. I'm at home. I can learn a new language. So there was a great demand in online language courses. Some translators turned to subtitling because during COVID and the lockdowns, people spend a lot of time at home. So streaming services had great demands of subtitling, or even holding webinars. So they opened up different spheres, and they had also had time at home to develop new skills.
Yeah. Do you think that lots of people would have left the industry altogether or left the activity of freelance translator altogether? Is that something that you have seen quite a bit of?
No, I don't think so. Some have taken part-time jobs somewhere, maybe in a different area, but people didn't stop translating or interpreting. Also, especially in Austria, support was great from the government. So it was possible to get through the hard times.
Okay. So in as much as indeed in the countries there was that support, that should have been okay. Now, there's of course the translation, there's also the interpreting world. How did you see things there? Because you're trained more as an interpreter, as a translator as well.
Well, the world of interpreters has changed a lot, as you can imagine. I mean, preparation work has been and is still done at home. But usually interpreters, especially conference interpreters, court interpreters, they go out, they go to the venues and work there. And COVID brought remote simultaneous interpretation, which existed before, but was not used that much. but that was the only possibility to hold events and to get interpreters. And working conditions online are very different for interpreters and very hard, especially for conference interpreters. There is no technical support. People work like with their headphones. Speakers often don't use external microphones. It is very hard on hearing. It demands more cognitive efforts from the interpreters. It is very tiring. We all know, like, spending all day in front of the computer, even only taking part in a webinar, is exhausting, and working online even more. So it is really hard.
But does the aggregate demand not increase, given that, you know, with technology, you don't have to travel, it becomes easier or cheaper to organize or to have interpreting for your conference, your event, even your meeting, even your bilateral meeting? Does not increase the demand for your services?
Yes and no.
Okay, tell me.
There has been increasing demand for shorter online interpretation. Like before, people would maybe not get an interpreter for half an hour, for 1 hour assignments, but now it is easy to just get an interpreter, especially if your own meeting is online already. But after 1.5 years of online events, people are tired. So conferences, they want to get together, they want to meet face to face, they want to network.
Okay.
And they also want to have the interpreters there. And even though it is more difficult and it is more expensive, there have already been live events because people really want to meet up.
Okay, so the so-called increase that people talked about during the crisis, like everybody will go online for interpreting and everybody will discover that's something easy to do, so the demand will be humongous, is more like a temporary phenomenon, is what you're saying. That's
what we feel, and that's what we hope.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Something else that we heard or that was discovered was to say, okay, well, there is already some degree of isolation, if you so will, you know, for a freelancer to work at home. But now the nature of services changes also. For instance, you know, there is a trend from the translation, traditional translation, more into post-editing, you know, where the service or the product, if I can use that word, it isn't, of course, the service is not as understood as well, probably by either the client or the provider, and that gives extra frustration. Is that something you've seen also, you know, either through yourself or in the organization that you belong to?
Yes, there is a lot of interpreters that they don't like post-editing for different reasons, and there is a growing sense of isolation because with the whole machine translation, post-editing process, a lot of focus is paid to the technical aspects. There has to be a lot of work done before, a lot of work done after, and the machines involved, the technology involved is very important. And the work of the translator or post-editor is such a small part that you don't get much attention. So there's maybe less contact, less feedback, less communication. That is something that the translators experience, yes. That
is experience. Is there any, because with the Universitas I belong, you also belong to FIT. Is this things that you, at the level of your organization, you're looking into, particular initiatives that you take from that perspective?
There is surveys and there is trainings for translators in these aspects, but it is something that you cannot stop. It is a technology that has come to stay. So we cannot counteract it. Everybody has to find a way to deal with it. And I mean, find other ways of social interaction. It's not the only concept.
Yeah. So on the social aspect, on the personal aspect, but so on the professional aspect, like certain training you would want to do, or certain other skills you want to develop in order to address particularly that point of, you know, performing a service that probably is not as well understood by everybody involved.
Yes, we're in Austria at Universitas. We want to offer post-editing trainings because a lot of translators don't really understand how it works or how to best work with it. So definitely we focus on that as well, and we prepare and offer trainings for translators.
Okay. And then, of course, on the most personal level, of course, staying at home, doing many different things.
Yes, like everybody else, it is difficult, especially if you have a family and you have children. I think everybody experiences that. If you sit at home and you have to watch your children in the same room that you work, it's as difficult for freelancers as it is for employees.
Yeah.
And you have to find balance in other ways. A lot of people started doing yoga or learning different skills. So
maybe this is a suggestion for TEF for next year, you know, that, that some yoga should be in the program. Yeah,
yeah.
you should take a note on that. So if that is a follow-up. Okay, thank you. I just get message here that for the poll, there's about 350 people, which is great. 350 people in the session right now, you understand. There's about 100 people who have participated. How was your work impacted by COVID? I work more from home. Interestingly enough, there's 30% who said there is no significant change in how I work. And then I work more from home than before, but I see a lot of negative impact. But so 30%, how would you react to that, Martina? No significant work for 30%. Is that something that sort of is in tune with what you saw in the organization?
That is the freelancers, because as I said, nothing has changed for them. They got their assignments online before and they get them now, mostly via email or platforms. I assume that's the voice of the freelancers.
Okay. Okay, so which in the end that is not such a bad thing after all if it doesn't change, and also if there were, you know, that's probably the not so bad outcome for that. Then okay, well, thank you, Martina.
You're welcome.
I would before we go to a sort of group discussion, I'd like just to give the floor more to the LSP world now. In the person of Alina. So Alina, maybe you want to talk briefly about your business and how it developed, and then we can talk in more detail on a couple of points. But if you would just want to present your business a little bit, that would be useful.
Thank you, Geert, for having me here and invited to talk in the name of small LSPs. I'm just like you, not a linguist myself. I haven't been trained as a linguist. I was trained as a manager and in legal sciences as well.
Okay.
So I finished law school.
Forgive me.
No problem, no worries. We tend to forget things. We've talked about this a couple of years ago in Sicily, if I'm not mistaken. It's normal. We should be happy that we forget. Otherwise, we wouldn't be humans, and we wouldn't be able to experience happiness if we don't forget anything.
Probably.
And yeah, about my business. So I started my business because I used to work as a translator and interpreter within the Ministry of Interior in Romania. Totally by chance, absolutely no preparation for that beforehand. And I just fell in love with this industry. And I think most of the people that are in this industry that activate just fell in love with it. And you're never over this passion, because it's something that is very alive and we all need to communicate. It's such a human attribute to communicate. My company is based in Bucharest. I've started it 15 years ago, went through different type of partnerships, been on my own for the past 5 years now.
Okay.
So I'm building AB language solutions, trying to develop the strategy. But I received one question at some point in one of the conferences that I attended: until where do you want to grow? So, and this, I think this is something we should all ask ourselves. Where do you want to go and how much do you want to grow? And I think the level of happiness in what we do is very important, because time is passing so fast and we need to enjoy what we do. And most of the people in the language industry are here for the passion for communication and for what they do. So yes, I'm Eastern European. I'm wearing a traditional.
I see that. Congratulations.
Like we were joking before the meeting.
Yes.
I'm wearing a traditional outfit today.
Now, like others, you've been impacted by COVID. How did that affect your particular company? Let's use that as an example, maybe a proxy for many others, but just in your particular case, what was it that struck you the most in terms of your organization, your business, when COVID hit in 2020?
First of all, I was very happy that all the strategies that I developed before the COVID pandemic and all the backups to backups that I developed and discussed with my team, and the technology that we implemented before this pandemic hit were so useful, and we were so able to adapt ourselves to total remote working for 2 months without too much previous notice. Happily, being a part of ELIA and an association, having this support group by my side, I was very easily and swiftly informed about the threat, because last year we had to cancel an awesome event, a together event.
Yeah.
And
but let's focus on your business, the organization of your company.
And we were informed well enough with enough time, so we all went remotely. At the beginning, we were afraid of what might happen if not receiving any type of orders. What should we do, and how we could continue our business? So we made a strategy to continue learning a lot. We had made a support group between us, even though we were apart and not being able to see each other. We're used
You mean
to
a support group among the colleagues?
Among the colleagues, yes.
Okay, yeah.
We had everyday meetings at coffee, talking to each other, seeing how we are. We spent at least half an hour connecting with each other. And
do
then
you still do that today?
Yes, we still do it. We have now we are working 4 days in the office and 1 day totally remote, though we have some colleagues that are permanently working remote. But we have 1 day per week when we all gather for an hour to have a coffee and chat about the wow moments and the scary moments of the week, and try to see how we can adapt our strategy if there's any immediate action that need to be taken, and just to have the connection between us, to maintain the level of trust, the level of empathy, and understanding each other.
How did you feel that the colleagues cope with that? Because, we spoke just with Martina, who works independently, of course, works as a freelancer, but then the colleagues, the employees, how did you see that? How could you react to the concerns that they had, and what did you do in order to assuage that?
Well, we tried to come back to the office as soon as possible because we felt the need to do that. We are used to working together and brainstorming together, and in-person brainstorming is much more creative than over remote connection. And when this wasn't possible to all come back to the office, we tried to have at least small groups meetings in person for a short period of time, respecting all the COVID measures. And this helped us a lot, the human touch, talking to each other, showing empathy, listening to each other, trying to be there for whatever they also need outside of the line of work, because we developed a family-like feeling inside the company. This is our culture.
Did you feel that you could work as productively as beforehand? Could you organize yourself in a way that you were just as efficient as a company as beforehand?
Yes, impressively and surprisingly, we were even more productive and even more efficient, but this was consuming us much more because we were so connected to what we were doing, and we were working so intensively at some point that I realized that it's less productive to be in the office and have the coffees, the cigarettes, the vices that office normally have. Yeah. Well,
but would that be then because you were in a sort of a crisis mode at that time? You said, okay, we need to work longer hours. This is a very bad situation, i.e. could you work in a permanent way so that you would be just as productive as beforehand? Or was it just because in these 2 months, like in my company also, it's crisis, etc. You make longer days, you work on weekends, which you normally would not do, etc. Well, what's your reaction to that?
Well, we actually didn't work longer hours. We structured our program very intensively in return, less breaks during the day, but we didn't work longer hours. I insisted on that because it's very important to keep the mental health. So we tried to have off-screen time and try to maintain this as a rule so that we can all keep up with the level of empathy and not dehumanize ourselves. But the level of involvement was increased because everybody felt more empowered because they were on their own to fulfill their tasks, and they had this intrinsic feeling that they need to give their best and support the group, support the company, support the culture that we have, and they worked much more intensively. But I insisted on not longer hours.
Did you hire since
yes.
we had to? How did that go?
We did hire and we did fire, and we did have some people that left our company in the meantime. The hiring process was quite interesting because we interviewed various, well, apparently fit people, professionally, humanly, and so on and so forth. But when we met them in person was something different, as in human touch, because I never hired people for competences. I hired them for the skills that they had, for the human side, for their values, because it's very, for me, it's very complex to have the same values aligned if people don't have the core values themselves. So we had the interviews, and then we had face-to-face meetings, or we had in office certain specific time to see how we get along and how the dynamics of the team is.
You still wanted to meet them before you hired them.
Yes, I do.
But then once they joined the team, you were already still in a virtual world, or you were already meeting in the office again?
Once they joined the team, some of them remained fully remote. And from time to time, they come 1 week each 6 months to stay with us in the office. So we try to keep that contact alive, even though they are working 99%.
So you do not have people on your team today whom you have not met? I mean, employees, not freelancers. No, you don't. Okay. Would that be something you think it would be possible?
Yes, but I would rather travel to meet them.
Okay. And if you hire them, are the things that the questions that you asked now that you wouldn't have asked beforehand?
Definitely, because yes. Why?
Well, I'm not looking for a job with your company, just but what questions would these be?
Questions related to communication skills. To test their communication skills, because this is very important when you are remote and you don't have the non-verbal signs to guide yourselves on. It is very important that people are able to communicate concisely and very authentically what they want to say, and in order to have this culture of understanding between each other.
And that is in writing or spoken?
Spoken mainly.
Spoken
mainly, yeah. In writing, it's compulsory. We cannot work in this industry if we don't know how to.
No, but it could be that you want to compensate with other types of questions, other type of skills. So yeah. Okay. So all in all, if you go back to the first poll, would you be among those where you said the world didn't change much, or I really had a hard time and it was really tough? So
for me, it was tough. I'm a people's person. I prefer people.
I think you speak for many others. So, okay. Thank you, Alina. Let's go a minute to, I will skip the large LSPs for a minute because in my world, ladies go first. So let me see whether Kata is still here, because Kata works in the technology world. But she also has a view and a special perspective as an HR senior. And so she has seen also from close up what the impact has been. So in a couple of words, what were the things that you focused most on during that period, Kata?
Yeah, thank you, Geert. Well, it was very interesting to listen to Alina, because she also spoke, I think, from heart of many of us who had to go from the offices to remote work. But to be honest, as we are anyway an international organization, so we were used to work remotely and virtually. But still, I would lie if I'd say that COVID didn't have any impact, especially on people who worked previously in the office, had collaborated much more in person, and when they needed to shift to the work from home setup, that changed a lot. What we experienced is that I don't say that it's the way how we worked what has changed, but it is really that the personal work and the personal life and the working life mixed up a lot for many people. And I think people started to feel much more isolated, and it had an impact on the level of stress that they experienced. So what we try to do in MemoQ is really to take care of kind of both the mental health and the physical health of our people. So like starting to offer psychological counseling opportunities for those who needed that. Because it's not only in our organization, but I really heard, as I'm a psychologist as well.
That's why we asked the question.
So that the level of mental issues increased a lot during this time, and people started to report from depression to anxiety. And I think this is a very important aspect that we needed also to think about. And we work with many people, more than 100 people. So we
there's about 130 people in the company.
Yeah,
is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So we really wanted to take care of them, and as soon as it was possible to go. So MemoQ we also had home office opportunities before COVID. So people who wanted to work from home, they had the opportunity to do so. And regarding the poll question, I think there are a couple of them. Our people, or majority of our people would say that they started to work more from home during COVID, of course, and they seem to enjoy it. So when returning to the office, we are still very flexible. In terms of, so we don't have any policies like you need to work 3 days in the office and 2 days you can go remotely, but it's really up to the individual to decide. And I think this is something that is going to be more and more important for bigger companies to be as flexible as possible with that, because there is a lot of individual differences between people. There are some who prefer to work from home and can stay much more focused. But there are others who on the very first day when they could come back, they were in the office and still they do come because they prefer to work.
If you don't mind, Kata, I'd like to go back what you said earlier about, the difficulties, psychological help, people who are really going through a rough time. And this, in the meantime, this whole thing has been with us for 18 months now. Is this something that you still see today? Do you think this is more a sort of a permanent situation, or has this just been a sort of an initial shock and things are normalizing now more from that perspective?
I think it depends on, again, on personal situations. So I still see the need for some help in some cases for some people. And interestingly now, I hear from our remote colleagues that they start to feel much more isolated. So even though they don't live in Hungary and they never come to the office to work, but they start to feel now that it's almost 2 years since we last met, they really start to feel isolated. So there is a pressure need from them to stay connected, to organize something. In the past, we used to meet at least 2-3 times per year. There was the MemoQ Fest also always, on site, and our colleagues came from all over the world to all those company events. And of course, in the past 18 months, this couldn't happen. And
even this could not happen,
and this puts them in a I can understand why they started to feel more and more isolated. And I think this is the biggest challenge to keep all those people still somehow connected. And
so you cannot do your fest or
offline.
Looks like very nice, actually, three parties a year. Yeah, well, I'm signing up for that. But so are there other things that you do at this stage, sort of, of course, you talked about the psychological part, etc. But are there other things that you sort of do in order to compensate, actually, or?
I mean, we have our regular company events, and teams are, meeting very often. We ask people to turn on their camera. We do believe, or I do believe that it helps to somehow stay connected. But meeting in person with our overseas colleagues is just not possible. So this is something I don't think you can replace with any kind of technological solution. So the human touch that Alina mentioned is really important, and you just can't hug someone through the computer.
I'm just curious, and it's not because I don't believe Alina, but in the hiring, because you're looking for different profiles also in a certain sense than those that we are looking for, to a certain extent at least. When we, I mean LSPs, because Alina and I both have each have an LSP. How did that change in your world, or was there a change actually, and how would you describe that change?
Well, we have been hiring in the past also virtually. So there were many colleagues who joined us without actually meeting in person, also before COVID. But it was really an experience. I was actually hired during COVID.
Okay.
So,
please tell us.
I can give a first-hand experience. As an HR manager, it was quite a strange situation. But as I said, our offices were not closed, so there were still some people coming to the office.
Okay.
But I didn't go to the office during the hiring phase at all. I mean, just a nice story about it. I'm quite tall. I'm more than 1.80. And when people, first we met, everyone was like, wow, I didn't think that how tall you are. So this is something you can't do via a Teams interview.
No, not really.
But okay, so to talk a bit more seriously, I think in terms of hiring, we really have a good way of doing that. So we use, of course, the technology platform to schedule and do the interviews and run the interviews. In terms of what we ask, I don't think it has changed a lot.
Okay.
And we have more rounds during the hiring process. So people meet different people. I mean, candidates meet different people in the organization during the process. So we try to get the human touch as well, and get to know them as much as possible virtually before making the decision. So that I don't think has changed that much.
Okay, thank you. Last question for you before I go to Kåre. Office layout, because in the technology world, we all think about the landscapes and the ping pong tables and all that good stuff that we see in all these campuses. Is that something that, well, first of all, I would assume you have it. I've never been to your offices, but is it something where you also want to change, so to make more your office a meeting ground because your team is relatively large? And if so, what are the initiatives that you're taking from that perspective, just by way of inspiration for all of us?
Actually, we have a very new office. We just moved in when COVID started. and this is absolutely a modern space. No ping pong table, but we have a gaming room. I think what is going to change, and again, back to the poll question, majority of the respondents said that they enjoy actually working from home more. So that will mean in the long run that less and less people will come to the office, and the function of the office will change. So in the past, we had individual desks. Everyone had worked in front of their computer on their own desk. Then we started to move for shared desks. I know that for many companies it exists that you don't anymore have your own desk, but
whole desking,
there are shared desks, and what I read is that actually the future is really about almost no desks in the office, because people will do the focused work from home, most likely, and they will come to the office to socialize, to do the type of work which is more efficient in person, like really the creative problem solving, the brainstorming, the collaborative type of work will come back to the office, but that will require some different type of spaces and not anymore the individual desks. So
it becomes like a sort of a marketplace or internal marketplace in a certain sense. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we go to Kåre, I would invite the director to launch the second poll. So we have that input, by the way, we went through Kåre. Kåre, you will represent, or thank you, Kata, first of all. Kåre, you will would like to have a few conversation with you with your experience as a larger company, also a global company, because that's something that is quite proper to your company or companies, which we haven't seen with those that we spoke with them till now. You were already remote because you were set all over the world, in a sense.
That's true.
How does that mean there was no impact? Of course not, but how would you qualify that?
Well, first of all, thank you for including me in the panel, and nice to meet so many people. Great that we have so many attendees for this session. So if I step back a little bit,
please.
So in my background, I worked for large software companies, and that's really most of my experience when it comes to the language industry, apart from the company that I'm working for now. And then in these large companies, most people that were in my group were in different parts of the world. Mm-hmm. So my directs, for example, people who reported into me, they were all in different parts of the world. I think I had one person who was on campus, but it would take longer to walk down and then go over and go into that building and meet that person than to just do a quick call to someone in a different country. So I was very much used to this when I then went into when I started Venga. And the other aspect that happened when we started Venga was that our first client had offices in many different parts of the world, and we had to have people who could service them in the same time zone. Mm-hmm. We had to have people in Europe, we had to have people in Asia, and then of course in the Americas. So there was really no option for us when we started out to build or to rent proper offices and to hire in lots of people because we were still on a shoestring budget at that point. But that meant that we just had to hire people in these different parts of the world. And I agree with some of the previous comments that in those days I did travel. So I did meet a lot of the people that we hired. And that was still in my mindset that we had to actually physically meet people before we hired them. So in that respect, Venga was set up as a global company from the start.
From the outset,
yeah. And then what we did, if we now get closer to March 2020, as the pandemic was starting, by that time we had over 100 people. And we had a few offices, so 2 kind of actual offices, and the other offices that we had were more, what are they called? Like you have these desks. Yeah. Well, you had these desks that you could use when you were in there, but you might only go in once a month or once a week or something like that. So when it happened, we had all these different people. We were already set up with systems, so we would meet online all the time anyway. So there was really no impact at all when the pandemic started, apart from the fact that we were all scared and we had no idea what was going to happen. And I remember actually I was in the US at the time, and I live in London now, but I was in the US, and our then president came on TV and talked about what the pandemic was going to mean. And this is, I think, when it was a very stark and a very dire message. And I flew home that afternoon, that evening, back to Europe again. And then I got back in the house. We talked about it, and we decided to pull the kids out of school that next day. And then I think 4 days later, all the schools closed and everything. It was just, it reminds you now, it was quite a tricky situation. And at that point, what we started doing, which I think I heard from some of the other panelists, we then ran weekly meetings. We reminded everyone about the emotional stress. And if you need any help, reach out to a colleague, reach out to HR, reach out to anyone in the management team if you feel like it, because just talking about it, I think, helps.
Yeah, then you say reach out to the management team, and then the management team itself.
I know, but actually talking to someone else and for that person to say, I'm scared too.
Exactly.
but it's
because when you're scared, it's about the business, how it would develop, whether you would still make your numbers, whether the company would survive. You might that type of thing as well. Then,
well, that was certainly one thing that that we thought about, and I similar to some of the other people, I think we drew up kind of worst case scenarios, and you had to look at the budget and all that. But that was one part of the worry. I think the other part of the worry was about family, friends, what's the world, you know, what's happening in the world. So so anyway, so the change was actually not that great for the company, and I think that's true for many companies that operate globally. You just, even if you have physical offices in different parts of the world, you still need to encourage that communication between these different offices. So another thing that we did as well, which I heard from Kata, I think, is camera on.
Yeah.
You know, if you're in a meeting, show your face.
Yeah.
And
I had some difficulties with that in my shop as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. People were sloppy, but the effect is actually quite negative. Yeah.
But you just have to make sure that people do that. I think we've met now twice before this session. And I think that I've already started to get to know you, all of you, through these different meetings. So I think if you're allowing the type of online meetings to include some personal stuff, you laugh about whatever it might be, home situation, or you saw a movie, etc. Then over time, you do get to know each other. And I think that's a really important part. So you don't just make it for I think that's an important lesson. Yeah, to leave the casual also in the meeting, so that you actually build that rapport with that other person, because you don't have the opportunity to do that physically. That's and then you really have to encourage people to actually talk to each other as well. If you have a question and you send an email and you get an email back, or a chat or whatever it is, and you don't understand, don't do another written thing. Set up a meeting, and then even if it's just 2 minutes, because by doing that, you are getting that communication across the company, which I think is so important, because having kind of top-down messages, and especially in a situation when there's lots of uncertainty, it's good to have that communication, I think, that goes across.
Is there a particular way in how you encourage that? Because that's actually a very interesting point what you just highlighted there, because sometimes there's 20 emails back forward, and if you talk with one another at 4 or 5 minutes, you can resolve that. Is there a way how you you cannot impose that, of course, I mean, we're not in that world anymore, but you can encourage that. How would you encourage that? Or is it, or you set the example, you call everybody up, or how would you do that?
Actually, I don't think that's a bad idea, actually. If you're running a company, to every week or so contact 1 or 2 people and just talk to people, but that's a different story altogether. What we did do is we happen to use a chat or collaboration tool called Slack, and we use too many other tools as well, but that one proved to be very successful for the situation we were in. So we set up different they're called channels inside of Slack. So we have one for fun, we have one for inclusion, we have one for good news, stuff that doesn't include COVID. So any good news that isn't COVID. We have 2021, which is big wins that we might have for the company, or feedback from customers that is really good. And then we have the tips and tricks. So those are kind of the general ones, which are not really work related. But
that is a wall-like type of thing.
It's a chat between people.
Okay.
So in a fun channel, for example, someone might share. We have one guy who shares a Friday joke every Friday. In the good news one, we have competitions where people can post information about songs that remind them of their childhood, or they can share baking examples. Here's the holiday season coming up, here are all the stuff where I'm baking, and then we can have a vote on who wins, etc. It's all fun.
Okay.
But doing that has really enabled us to build camaraderie across geographies. People who happen to like the same crazy heavy metal band or whatever it might be, suddenly they have a connection, and suddenly they start talking. And I think that's hugely important if you're going to run a remote team, because I think running remote teams is not easy. You have to put effort into it. And I know I'm probably spending too much time, but just a few things.
No, that's right.
I think if you are going to have successful remote teams, then you cannot have an office where you have a conference room and then you have 3 people on the phone or online. If you have a meeting when you have 1 person online, everyone has to be online. Because otherwise that person is always going to be excluded.
Yeah.
If you arrange, like now we're getting to the holiday season, if you
sure.
arrange a holiday party, then you can't arrange a holiday party where there's a big office and then not have anything else. Get everyone online. I know that some people might be having wine, some might be having coffee, but you have to think about that. So you consciously as a company,
equality,
yeah, because otherwise you're telling people that you don't really count. It's us and then you.
And then all the others, yeah. The poor guys who couldn't make it, yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of effort, but I think it really pays off.
Okay, well, thanks. The poll is still running. We're going to close it in just a few seconds. So we have everybody, I think there's about 100 people who reacted right now, 120. So we will close it in just a couple of seconds. Okay. Well, here's the results, but we can talk it through then. Thanks, Kåre, because then I think we can talk it through in among the 5 of us also. I feel more connected to the outside world thanks to technology. I feel more isolated than before COVID despite technology, 36, 64, so 2/3, 1/3. So 1/3 feels more isolated than before COVID, although technology doesn't do the entire trick. And I listened actually carefully to what Kåre was just mentioning. Yes, it helps, but you have to do it in a very diligent and a very disciplined way also. I think that is what Kåre implicitly wanted to say from that perspective. So, well, thank you all for these more detailed contributions. There were some questions from the floor. I thought I have some difficulty in accessing them, though, I must say, in all fairness. Because supposedly this would be Q&A. Here it is. This one I see here. What is the hiring tendency now in the private sector? What competencies and skills are now sought by employers? Oh, here we go. Top questions. Are there any post-editing online courses that you could already suggest? That's a very practical question. So maybe Martina could react quickly to that. I think that's more her thing.
Unfortunately, not really. We organized something in Austria, but that is in German. I don't know about any that are being offered now or in the near future. I'm sorry, I cannot suggest any now.
No luck. That might be something I'm seeing. I see Alina here. With Elia, we're working on a course for project managers. This might be something also that would be inspiration. I think it's just there. Actually, but it is something that we can work together also with the academia to see how we can do something more at the European level, just on university per university. But thanks for the question. It's from Anonymous, but I thank Anonymous for the question. What is the hiring tendency now in the private sector? What competencies and skills are now sought by employers? I think we touched on that briefly already. Certainly at level of Alina and Kata, maybe less so Kåre, unless Kåre wants to make a comment on that as well. Are there things that you would be looking for in your teams now that you would not think about in the past in hiring? The communication skills Alina talked about. Are there other things?
Yeah, and I think you do hire for cultures. I agree completely with that comment, because culture is crucial for a company to succeed. And if you are remote, for example, you need that openness and that willingness to cooperate. But I do believe that you can do that remotely. And then I think when it comes to the specific competencies and skills, that's really down to the company and where you are. Yeah. It could be that you need some people that have this type of experience, but that changes over time.
But that brings me to another question, actually. I agree with you, Kåre, on the openness, but how do you get an idea about that in talking with people? This is something, in my experience, or my view, rather abstract, that you only get to know once the people have been in your team for a couple of months. Or is there things that you, how do you gauge that?
Well, I'm not sure I'm the best person to answer that, but
you're
that's
certainly a very good person. So
well, yeah. But that's the same if you interview them in person, face to face. We can touch each other or whatever, as opposed to online. It still takes time to figure out how they're going to fit in. But I think you can stress this, try to find out how much they worked remotely before, how familiar they are with it, what do they think are the difficulties of doing that. I think when we spoke at one time, first time I worked remotely, I had to go down to the bank or the hardware store in the middle of the day just to speak to someone. And then I'll go back and start working remotely again. But gauge the experience they have of having worked remotely, I think is important.
We have an HR specialist among us. We are already lucky. So Kata, what would be your answer to this?
Yeah, I was just about to step in regarding also some competencies, but to the question about hiring to the culture, I think it's very important. And I agree with Kåre that no matter whether this interview is in person or through a platform or virtually, that we need to understand what motivates the people that we plan to hire or to work with, and then we need to see whether what we can offer will be a good fit to them, or how they will fit to the company, to the team. What are their important values? What is important for them in a job? I think those questions can really help us to understand whether this person would be someone who could fit into the team. And maybe regarding the competencies, because that was quite a specific question, I think what is important, this kind of competencies of the future workers, and obviously this kind of flexibility, openness for learning agility are those competencies that I think most of the companies, but the technological companies certainly will look for any
future
devil's
advocate. Thank you, Kata. If you're the devil's advocate, you would say flexibility is doing more for less.
Yeah. I think it is.
Or am I nasty today? Yeah.
Yeah, but we need to understand whether people are, and that relates again to the culture. That if you really work in a culture which does not tolerate a rigid mindset, then you will need to make sure that the people you are hiring are not rigid and they are open and quite.
This is something you could test also with some of these online tools like Talento and consorts, to have a view on, how people, what makes them tick in a certain sense, right?
Yeah, there are different ways and tools to do that.
If you allow me, I would like to add the fact that we all need curiosity in our people, so that they are self-driven and like to develop themselves, to grow. And most of them, our most recent generations are more attracted to purpose rather than to efficiency and to, I don't know, financial gains. If they identify themselves with the purpose and the culture of the company, they tend to feel more empowered, thus being more involved in what they do.
You think that was not true in the past?
It was true in the past, but now I think it's much more important than in the past, because working remotely requires a lot more of this.
Yeah, actually, if I could just interject, and I think that's very true. I think that has changed. I think the aspirations of each generation, I think, is different. And I think one thing that we spent a fair amount of time within the company to talk about is growth. That's always been a focus for the company. And now when we're joining we're joining in with ARGOS Multilingual, we're basically more than doubling in size. So why is growth so important? Well, growth in itself is not necessarily that important, but growth enables us to have more job opportunities and career paths. It enables us to work with cool customers. So we get to work on cool projects, which looks good on my resume. I know more stuff now. So that's always been the focus, I think, for us. So.
Okay. Thank you. Maybe in the interest of time, because I see we have only 20 minutes left and there were still a few questions, I want to make sure that we are decent to the audience. Has the relationship between the translation service provider and the customer been affected since the pandemic? Alina.
Yes and no. There are sorry to give such an evasive answer. There are a type of clients that have similar cultures with yours, and you can connect better with them if they're online, because it's much more easier to access them and have to one-on-one talks and explain more your services. We had one client that we developed a huge conference with remote simultaneous interpretation and also subtitling and all other services. And we developed a relationship from there, and everything was facilitated by the fact that we were much easily and rapidly accessible to each other to clarify whatever aspect was needed. But there are other customers that miss the fact that we used to have in-person monthly or bi-monthly meetings to analyze the state of our collaboration. So depends on the type of client and the type of services that they accessed, mainly, in my point of view.
Yeah. Martina, because, you know, freelancers have as clients LSPs. Was there anything you remarked there? You and your peers?
Yeah, I think it has not changed much. Maybe you have some clients that live in the same, or live their offices in the same city or town that you live in. So in the past, sometimes you would meet up, you might go there and talk about projects. This does, of course, not happen anymore. It has not happened in the last 1.5 years. Which has a positive and negative aspect, because as we said before, meeting up in person sometimes is more efficient. You get things done faster and more effectively, but on the other hand, you save time, you don't have to travel, which also is more efficient. So it has changed a bit, but not that much, because most of the contact was either by phone or by email in the past, and it is now as well.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Maybe you want to go back to the questions again. There was one about
actually,
hybrid.
While we're looking at that, the biggest impact for us has been sales. We can't go to conferences, we can't meet new clients, whereas the existing clients already had offices in different countries and stuff, so we would rarely meet them face to face anyway.
Yeah. So that has been also, I can speak of personal experience, also very frustrating not to being able, if you want to grow your business, conquer new clients in a virtual world, that is relatively difficult to do. It can happen, but it takes twice the effort. At the same time, what I also saw, I'm not a panelist, but I'll just make a small comment here. What I saw is that there is more tolerance now for online meetings with clients, while beforehand they sort of expected you to show up, because you had to show courage, you had to take the train to the other side of the country to see the people, because that was part of the values in a certain sense, because in the end, that's what it is. But now we see people virtually, and people say, okay, well, this is actually more efficient for us and it's more efficient for you, so everybody wins. That's certainly something that in my case I have felt. There was a question on will the virtual, or will the sort of the hybrid system prevail, a hybrid way of working? I'll just keep that question because I had a couple of questions at the very end that I wanted to ask. What is the experience with imprinting being done by non-natives in cheap countries? That's a question particularly for Martina.
Well, when we don't get booked, we are not there to hear those interpreters in cheap countries, but of course, there's good interpreters everywhere. You cannot generalize, but in general, very often it's not their native language. They might work in between languages that are not even their second language, maybe. So there is a danger that interpretation services don't work out properly. And we have seen clients come back. They try it, it doesn't work properly, they're not satisfied, they're not happy, and then they come back.
Okay, because the quality just isn't there. There's a question: some companies are hiring and onboarding people remotely. Any advice to a person being hired in this way? I think we talked quite a bit about this, so if you don't mind, I'll skip that question. I'll go to the one in on MT. As to MT reports reports no great efficiency gains in post editing. Why is it requested by some EU tenders and LSPs? This is a bit off chart for our conversation here, but if there's somebody who feels the urge to have a quick comment, I'll certainly take it.
Can I take that question?
Sure.
And then I'm very curious on Kåre answer as well, so I'll give just my quick one. We use MT for time efficiency, and when the client has specific requirements, and there are also EU institutions that ask post-editing for the MT that they developed inside the European Union institutions. So MT is used for efficiency reasons, cost reduction, and not mainly, but time reduction. Kåre, I'm very curious in your opinion.
Yeah, no, actually, I would copy what you're saying. Oops, sorry. I thought I'd turn everything off. Sorry.
That's a Skype sound.
I know, it is. My apologies. Okay.
Yeah, but
we'll give him a second. We'll give him a second.
Yeah.
Kara, you're good. You're on mute now. Okay. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Very good.
Yeah.
So I would copy what you just said with efficiency, and also there's some reduction, whatever. But to us, MT is just another tool that is in here. The tricky part is that I haven't read the report, so I can't really comment on what the report says.
Yeah.
But I think it is another tool. And, you know, we all use computers when we do translation work at the moment. We don't do it by hand. We don't send the finished product in a letter that then the client can open and read. We send it via email, or we are connected via an API or whatever it is. So we, I think in the industry, should use all the tools that we have. But I also believe, I think it was a little bit of that in the session before this one, that there are just, having been in software all my life, there are just huge amounts of stuff that the machines cannot do. So I have no fear for the future of the industry either, but I think we should utilize any products that
exactly, the progress is there. You turn it to that advantage. Yeah. Let me go back to the questions for a second, just to make sure that we cover the questions that were asked.
Oh, well, while you are searching for the question.
No, it's not gonna. No. How can a translator stand out in a pool of translators when all communication is done remotely? I feel LSPs tend to forget that freelancers are people. Oops, that hurts. How can a translator stand out in a pool of translators when all communication is done remotely?
Actually, can I say that?
Yeah, sure.
Stand out in a pool, freelancers people. No, I think it's really important that we understand that we're all in this together. And that goes for the client as well as the middle person, if you want, the LSP, and all the translators, interpreters in the world. Without the people that we work with closely and have done for many, many years, without all the translators, we would be nothing. And it's hugely important that we value each other, we treat each other with respect, and we also share as much information as we can. We sometimes complain that the client kind of throw things over the wall to us. Well, then let's not do the same thing to the people that we work with. We're all language partners. And I think if anyone has any complaints about what our company has done, then let me know, because this is something we keep talking about all the time.
Yeah.
We're only as strong as the people we work with.
Absolutely. No, I can subscribe to 100%, Kåre. Thanks for that.
Same
for my shop, please, Alina.
Can I also come here? It's the human side that is more important with the MT as well, because the MT shows that repetitive tasks can be automated, and all you can do is stay human and improve yourself. And as a translator, you also need to stay human to understand that on the other side of the line, the LSP line, there's also a human. So it has to be an equal treatment between us. We are, just like Kåre was saying, partners in all this, along with clients. And yes, without translators, there wouldn't be communication in this world worldwide, not just in a specific case.
I see a reaction here. The problem with MT is that it does not speed up work, but it lowers the wages anyway. Just to put it in a nutshell, the translators pay the price for the hype. I think in as much as MT is poorly understood, that is probably right. But I'm not sure that all the companies poorly understand MT. So But go ahead,
and I think the other part of that with the hype is that it's something that we all suffer from. I think there's an article in the online newspaper, and that says that, you know, within 2 weeks, MT will translate everything perfectly. And there's a lot of misinformation that comes out that way. And then, of course, the people in the companies that we work with believe some of this. So there's a lot of education that has happened.
Yeah.
Can I just
sure, go ahead, Alina.
Can I just add something? It depends a lot on that human factor that I was saying, the communication. If a translator receives a bad MT, they should immediately talk to the project managers that sent it to them and inform that the MT is very badly, and then measures will be taken, clients will be informed, and so on and so forth. But if there's no communication, there's no improvement.
Well, what is also, I speak from a personal name now, I think, and I have to be careful with Kata here, but you know, in the technology world, there is this tendency of, and they're very good at it actually, to saying, okay, buy my product and your life will improve, or everything is going to be fantastic. And there's always, of course, a level of complication that comes with every development, but that, of course, people don't hear or don't want to know. And I see some of that as well. So that, you know, they're very good at selling their advantages of their solutions, and, you know, you have to live with the rest. But anyway, what I wanted to do, because there's only 10 minutes left, you know, will the hybrid way of working prevail? You know, I was curious to see what would be your views of each of you. What would be the long-term effect of all this? So the things that you would say within 3 years, yeah, we didn't do that in the past, but now because of Corona or despite Corona, you know, this is something really where our life has changed, our way of working, the interaction between our personal and our professional life, maybe in our professional life as well, but let's leave that beyond scope today. But what would be the things that you say, okay, now this is really a change that we've seen and that has been accelerated, or that has become a sort of a more permanent feature? Please take the floor as you see fit.
I would say, if you allow me,
Sure.
I would say that we will not prevail. And my saying this is based on a Gartner study that I read, that it was stating, and this was last year, if I'm not mistaken, that 40-something% of work would be done remotely. So I do believe that we will keep a lot of human interaction as well. So not prevailing, but the proportion will increase from my point of view. Kåre.
Can I do the opposite? Okay.
That's good.
I knew.
So I yeah, you set it up. We had, I mentioned earlier, we had 2 physical offices that people would go to, and they were the ones that had the most problem not going to the office and meeting with coffee in the morning, etc. But now they're actually one of the most active online chatters that we have. I wake up really early, so I can hear when you start plinging on my iPad, and that's when they start talking to each other. And it's about like 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning in Europe. We're now merging with ARGOS Multilingual, and we will become a bigger ARGOS Multilingual. Now, they have more people in offices. So they've had a very interesting journey now where a lot of the people who are in offices had to start working remotely. And I think for us to be strong going forward, I understand that people will go back, but we need to be really careful to capture and keep that way of working so that we can become a strong global team instead of becoming silos again. So this is going to be something we will be working on quite hard.
Martina?
Yeah, so if hybrid also includes like interpretation services and remote simultaneous interpretation, I think it will stay, but not as big as it is now. As I said before, participants are hungry for direct contact. So I think most events will go back to being live, but smaller things might stay online. I think that will stay. I think also that companies will have smaller meetings online and then also have the interpreters online with them. I think traveling will be reduced a bit, which also is a good thing for the environment.
Absolutely, absolutely, not to be disregarded. Kata?
Yeah, I also think that it will stay with us.
for sure. The level or the extent is a question, but I do think that we will work more and more virtually, and it will stay like that. So for me, really, the question how to make it wisely and how to really learn all those skills that are required to manage hybrid teams, to manage people working remotely. And also from bigger companies' perspective, I think one of the biggest challenge what is going to come is the global workforce and the labor market that is now truly global. So I think this is also an interesting topic, how we will
that's something we did not touch about
in the future. Yeah.
So it would be easier now to have teams, let's say, across Europe or across the world, just because, you know, the interaction through technology is so easy.
Yes,
and we understood through Kåre how to do it exactly.
Yeah, but on the other hand, or people can also, so people have much more freedom in choosing and selecting different type of jobs outside of their country, and that, you know, in some cases it's also a threat and also an opportunity. So,
okay. And that's also an interesting one for social law, but that's a completely different story. That's for other people to deal with. Everybody his own job.
Goes too far, yeah.
Okay, wonderful. In the interest of time also, because I know that Dev is very, very strict on timing, so I want to respect that, and I want to make sure we close this off decently. Let me thank you all from the bottom of my heart. I would say Kåre, Kata, Alina, and Martina for the preparation and for the sharing your thoughts today and being so open as you have been and so transparent as you have been. So I enjoyed this, speaking for myself, very, very much. And with that, I will hand it over back to Aminda.
Hello, and thanks for leading such interesting discussions here, most fascinating.
My pleasure.
And of course, tying in with everything else, all the themes that we've been already touching on. So very good to develop those even further. So there is now going to be an hour's lunch break when you can have something to eat and refresh your brain a moment and catch your breath before hopefully rushing into those last-minute one-to-one networking meetings that you've scheduled over the break. And of course, you can always decide to go and visit those virtual booths that you've been meaning to and not had time to. They're there via the exhibition tab on the left-hand side of your menu. And then at 1 o'clock, be prepared to be amazed with our Show Me Your Case session with live demonstrations of some IT tools in development and on the market. And that'll be starting at 1 o'clock Central European time. I hope you can make it for then. We will also be asking you to fill in a feedback form at the end of this event so we know how we've done and we can improve for the future. Your feedback is always most welcome. There'll be a notification about that underneath the little bell on the right-hand side of your screen. So please do fill that in. It's really important because we do take into consideration your feedback when designing the next event. So that'll be very important. But until then, until 1 o'clock when we're back with Show Me Your Case, I will now close this session.